Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
And today we're talking about Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Released in 1984, directed by Leonard Nimoy, written by Harve Bennett, and starring William Shatner, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Walter Koenig, George Takei, Nichelle Nichols, Robin Curtis, Christopher Lloyd, of course, and Leonard Nimoy as adult Spock, which we'll get into, I guess. So this came out 2 years after Wrath of Khan, and at the end of Wrath of Khan, of course, Spock was killed off. So this was their attempt to bring him back. Now, John, I remember when we talked, I listened briefly to our Wrath of Khan episode because I was just kind of curious. And you talked about how you didn't watch any of these movies until you had finished the original series, right?
That's correct. I had never seen a Star Trek movie until after I finished the original series, and that was actually after the release of Into Darkness.
Oh, wow. Okay. So did you watch all of the old movies like back to back basically, or how did you?
Pretty much, yeah. I did want to watch the movies until after I finished. I didn't get into Star Trek until Into Darkness was coming out, and that's when I started watching the original series.
Okay, gotcha.
And I really got into Star Trek once I started watching it, and then I definitely didn't want to see any of the movies until I finished the series so that there wouldn't be any spoilers or anything.
Right.
And I don't remember for sure if I watched them back to back, but I'm pretty sure that once I finished the original series that I just watched
marathoned them. Yeah.
And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think I started watching Next Generation until I finished the all of the original series movies.
Oh, wow. Okay, gotcha. I thought you meant we're going to say after you finish the original series, but after you finish the movie. So you're really going in order, basically.
Yeah.
And I know you still have not seen any of the Next Generation movies, aside from maybe Generations?
So I did watch Generations because it's a bridge. But
right.
Yeah, I haven't finished the Next Generation, so I have not started the movies yet.
Yeah. I'm a little different than you. I watched the movies first before I really got into the show because I kind of got into the movies before the 2009 Star Trek came out. I think they had announced it. They might have even... I don't think a trailer had come out by the time I got into the movies. But I know I watched Wrath of Khan while I was still working at Blockbuster. And so I was there from 2002 to 2006, something like that. So it was around 2005-ish, I think I watched Wrath of Khan. But it wasn't until later, when I was living with my brother, that I decided to kind of start marathoning the movies because he was interested in watching them. And so I think I went back and watched Motion Picture then I rewatched Wrath of Khan. And so I do remember watching this for the first time, and I don't remember disliking it, but I know I didn't like it as much as Wrath of Khan. And I think
which was quite the opposite for me when I first watched it.
Right. Yes, it's funny because they've always said that the odd movies are the bad movies and the even movies are the good movies. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad movie.
Well, we looked it up, and on Rotten Tomatoes, it actually has what you would say is a good.
Yeah, it's got like a
rating.
70-something% or something like things.
Yeah,
right?
It's like 79. It's like 1 under 80. So it's
it's not bad at all.
Especially for being an odd movie, which is considered
the bad
bad Star Trek movie. Yeah, that's pretty high.
No, I agree. I think it's pretty good. But I think we'll because I know you have a different opinion on the odd movies and the even movies, and I think we should save that for Star Trek 4. Because, like I said, I don't think this really counts as a bad movie. But or maybe we'll save it for Star Trek 5 or something. I don't know. But But anyway, I do remember watching it for the first time. I've only seen it once before I rewatched it for this episode, and I think I even enjoyed it more this time around. My first time around, like I said, I don't really remember disliking it, but I just also don't. I think I just kind of watched it, was like cool, and moved on.
Yeah.
What did you feel when you watched it for the first time, if you remember?
Oh, I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll just go ahead and jump out there with the odd and even, because I just thought of this and I wonder if this is what it was.
We'll jump right into it.
So like I said, with Wrath of Khan, the expectation was so high. Like, everyone was just talking so highly about that movie that when I watched it, I knew that it was like, you know, and even you had mentioned to me, you were like, "Oh, just wait till you see Wrath of Khan." So I, you know,
overhyped a little too much.
Way overhyped for me.
Yeah.
And I almost loathed Wrath of Khan.
Wow.
Honestly, like, I was so disappointed in Wrath of Khan.
Wow.
So I wonder if, because of my disappointment for Wrath of Khan, and then I'm like, well, let's see what this one is.
The third one's gonna be
Search
even
for
worse.
Spock. And then, like, I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. So then
Expectations can have a huge.
Oh, yes.
You know. Yeah.
And I wonder then if that, I'm like, well, three was pretty great. I liked it. So 4's got to be, and then
Even better.
what? No. And then again with that, I'm like, well, 4 is just, surely 5 can't, you know, 4's bad, 5's got to be awful. And then that, I'm wondering if that's what happened.
That could be. I could see that being the case. And I don't recall knowing which ones were good and bad when I sat down to watch them.
Uh-huh.
And the only one I really remember disliking, just flat out, was 5. And I have not watched it since. So it'll be interesting to rewatch that for the podcast and see what I feel.
I have
about
a feeling it's bad.
it.
I just have a feeling.
Yeah.
I will say that Search for Spock, I think I really liked it when I first saw it. And I would say I didn't enjoy it as much as I did my first viewing. I will say that.
Gotcha. Okay.
We'll go into more details as we go on.
Cool. Yeah. So you said you finished the original series and then you went into the movies. I watched the movies, I think even before I really saw. I think I had seen one episode of the original series because I was a fan of Wrath of Khan and I realized that Khan was in the original series, so I really wanted to see that episode, and I think I had to catch it on like Nick at Night or something.
You had to be like paying attention and be like, is this the night that they
it was
episode?
Like it came on at like 2 a.m. or something, one of those things. I think I taped it because I figured I wasn't gonna be able to watch it. But that was before
different time.
Exactly. It was before streaming was a thing. So I didn't really have the DVDs were out. But I was going to say, I didn't have the option of just sitting down and watching the original series before I watched the movies. After I got into the movies, I wanted to watch the original series, and I did buy them on DVD. And I actually remember they were hard to find. I think I found the first season, I think I found either on eBay or something, but I remember going to CD Warehouse, and they had seasons 2 and 3. And they were...
You just sparked a memory for me, by the way. I can't continue.
Okay. Well, I don't remember what the price was, but I remember I asked him, I was like, how much is Star Trek 2 and 3? And he was like, oh, it's blah, blah, blah. And I remember thinking, that is way more than I want to spend. And in my brain, I remember going, don't do it, man. You don't spend that much money. That's stupid. And I was like, okay, I'll take them.
But now you're glad you did.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So,
I actually did watch Star Trek before, and I had forgotten that my dad and I found some. They would have been VHS tapes of the original series volumes at the library.
Oh yeah,
and we had checked some of those out. We didn't watch a whole bunch of them, maybe like 8 episodes.
Right.
But I'd forgotten that, and I liked Star Trek. But by the time I went back and watched it on Netflix when Into Darkness was out and I was trying to get into Star Trek, I didn't remember any of the episodes that I had seen.
Yeah, like I said, I can't even remember what the episode is called, the one with Khan, but I think that was the only one I had seen before. Maybe even before the new movie came out, 2009 movie. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, maybe I am wrong because I think I bought the DVDs before the movie came out for the season, so I think I had started kind of watching it. But actually, I'm a bad Trek fan because I still have not finished the original series. I'm still in season 3.
Well, season 3 is kind of hard to get to.
Right. But I have started Next Generation. I haven't finished that either, but I have seen the Next Generation movies too. So, but yeah. So real quick, anybody who's watching the YouTube video, I didn't have a Star Trek shirt to wear, but I've got my Star Trek glass, which hopefully you can kind of see that there. I got this from Comic-Con. It says Star Trek on the other side. This came in one of the mystery boxes I bought from Comic-Con, so figured I should use it tonight.
And I have a Star Trek shirt somewhere, but it's MIA. And I was also telling Justin that I have a real, so I started collecting pint glasses earlier this year, actually. I probably have 10 or 12 now. But the first pint glasses I ever was gifted were several years ago, and they were Star Trek pint glasses. And all 3 of the 4 have broken, but the one I have left is Spock, but it's got a crack down it, so I can't use it.
Yeah.
But it's a display piece.
It's cool.
So,
still cool though.
It is awesome because
cool
it's not even it's like an animated. It's like a drawing of Spock.
Yeah.
And each one of the cups had like a little bubble with him saying, and Spock says, "Live long and prosper."
Very cool.
And Kirk said, "Set phasers to stun."
Speaking of drawings, did you watch the animated series?
I think
from
it
the
might
70s?
be the animated.
It might be
series.
from that?
Yeah, it might be.
That's one I also have on DVD, but have not really. I think I've seen one episode. My goal was to finish the original series and then go into the animated series, and I still haven't finished the original series. I just need to sit down and marathon it one day. Those episodes are 50 minutes, so I think it would take me more than a day, but I just need to take a weekend or something and marathon it. But
yeah, it's interesting that they were that long. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but were shows typically that long back then?
I don't know. I mean, I really only have that show to really kind of go off of, I think, because I feel like some of the other older shows I watched were half-hour shows, but those were 25 minutes. So I think they just didn't show as many commercials back then as they do now.
Right. And those were probably sitcoms too, weren't they?
Yeah, I was thinking The Twilight Zone. That was kind of what came to mind. That's not really a sitcom. It was just a half-hour. I think it was a half-hour show.
I was going to say that might have been an hour.
Well, maybe it was, and I wouldn't be surprised if that one was 50 minutes. This movie takes place pretty much right after Wrath of Khan, I believe. I meant to pop in Wrath of Khan and kind of watch the end, but I didn't. But I did watch this movie twice, and
yeah, so did I.
I watched the first time just kind of regularly, and then the second time I listened to it with commentary from Leonard Nimoy, Harv Bennett, Robin Curtis kind of shows up for a minute, and I think a cinematographer kind of chimes in too. I think they all recorded them separately, and they just kind of used the best parts probably for.
I did not watch it with commentary the second time. I watched it twice straight through because the first time my kids were three out of my 4 kids were in my room, and they just would not stop talking, and I was also just apparently having a really bad ADD moment at that point because I
could not focus.
I couldn't focus, and then I noticed I was falling asleep at one point. There was 15 minutes left, and I was like, did I fall asleep? Because I don't know where I am.
What's going on?
So the next morning, I just paused it. I woke up the next morning, put it in, and I had no idea what was going on. So I was like, let's
start this over.
Let's try this again.
Yeah.
So the second viewing was way more focused and have much better understanding.
That's good. I did actually take a couple more notes this time around. The first time I watched it, I think I took one note, and I was like, that's not good enough, really. Well, the first note I wrote was that this is Leonard Nimoy's directorial debut. He was a first-time... I don't know if he had directed TV shows. I could look at his IMDb and find out. But this was his first feature-length film. And one of the things he mentioned in the commentary, which is actually what I always thought, I thought that he wanted to kill off Spock because he didn't want to play Spock anymore. That's what I always thought from Wrath of Khan. That is not, I guess, the case. I don't know.
That surprises me. That's what I thought too. Probably from you and your lies.
Well, maybe, probably. Maybe I even said that in the Wrath of Khan episode. I don't recall. But listening to the commentary this time around, he said that because even Michael Eisner, who was the head of Paramount at the time, thought that as well. He had I guess it was a rumor that got picked up in the trade whatever papers that they have in Hollywood, Variety and whatnot, that Leonard Nimoy had written it into his contract that he would do Wrath of Khan as long as Spock was killed off and he didn't have to do any more. So then when Leonard Nimoy's name came up to direct Search for Spock, Michael Eisner was kind of like, what? Why? This guy doesn't even want to play Spock anymore. Why would we let him direct 3? Right. He had it in his contract that he didn't want to play Spock anymore. And Leonard Nimoy had to go to him and say, no, that's not the case at all. I want to play Spock. I have no problem. I like Spock. And so I don't know whose idea it was to kill him off in Wrath of Khan, but Leonard Nimoy obviously was totally fine with continuing on the legacy of Spock, if you will, and wanted to direct this movie. So they let him do it. And they talked. I have no idea what the budget was. But they talked a lot in the commentary about how they were given a very tight budget. And
that shocks me with the success of Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, me too. And I don't know if it was because he was a first-time director, and they didn't want to throw a whole bunch of money at him, or what. But he said they had a lot. They were talking about there's certain shots or certain scenes where they have just close-ups of the actors because they're reusing some of the same sets, and they didn't want you to be able to see that it's the same set, just kind of redressed and stuff like that. So pretty interesting. But yeah, Leonard Nimoy's directorial debut. He went on, of course, to direct Star Trek 4. He also directed 3 Men and a Baby. And I don't know what else. I just know that he directed 3 Men and a Baby, and that's always kind of been funny to me.
Speaking of Wrath of Khan, I have a note here, and I couldn't remember if the scene where he does the mind meld with McCoy, was that in Wrath of Khan, or was that just added into this movie?
It was in Wrath of Khan, I believe. Again, I didn't go back and rewatch Wrath of Khan, but he talks in the commentary about how I don't know I can't remember who it was, if it was Nicholas Meyer or if it was the producers or something, but they said, what can we do to kind of maybe set it up for a potential something, to bring him back or something. And they left it up to Leonard Nimoy, and he was like, well, I'll mind meld with McCoy and just say one word. I'll say remember, and that can kind of leave open a door for us. And so I believe it is in Wrath of Khan, which is whoever came up with that was smart.
Yeah.
Whoever was like, you know what? Because they didn't have an idea. When they were shooting Wrath of Khan, they didn't have Search for Spock in mind.
That's what my question was right. How could it have been in Wrath of Khan if they didn't know where they were going with this? So that was my question, was Search for Spock an idea that was
already in the works
when they were filming Wrath of Khan?
Right. And it's from my understanding of that commentary, no. And it was kind of something at the last minute that they just decided to do to kind of give themselves an opening for the next movie. And it was smart and it worked. And I thought it kind of really worked really well with the story and everything.
Yeah. I agree.
So this movie starts off, they shot Spock out of the Enterprise and he landed on the Genesis planet. And that's kind of how Wrath of Khan ends, I believe. And then that's also the opening credits of this movie. We hear Spock do the famous opening, speech that's from the television show, The Final Frontier. And then the opening credits play.
Was it just me, or did he sound kind of weak when he was doing it?
I don't know. I mean, it didn't sound weak to me. It sounded like Leonard Nimoy, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, it sounded like Leonard Nimoy, but it sounded like, to me, it sounded like he was kind of weak.
maybe he was doing it from the idea that it was his katra, his like soul kind of, which was maybe a little weak.
That's kind of what I was wondering. So either that or they woke him up at like 3 a.m. and
they're like, hey, even though he was directing the movie, hey, we need you to record this thing. He's like, what? It's my movie.
I'm the director here, but fine.
So then Enterprise is on its way back to Earth. Even though they never, I mean, like none of the people actually go down to Earth. They go to the space dock hovering above Earth.
Right. Which is also another note that I kind of took, which was it's later. So I'll save it for them.
All right.
But it's related to them going back to Earth. We'll just say that.
Well, I don't have much else to say. They go to space dock. They see the Excelsior, which is apparently like the new,
right?
The fancy new,
which was kind of
starship.
cool.
Yeah,
that they're making the Enterprise like kind of obsolete, and the original crew doesn't want to give up the Enterprise because it's the Enterprise,
right?
Especially Scotty. And they even put Scotty as the chief engineer on
the Excelsior,
which I thought was awesome. Had he been on the ship, he had to have been to mess with the. Yeah, he did, because he makes the comment that it's easier to the more like complicated they make the pipes, the easier it is to clog.
Right. Yeah, and he even has a quick conversation with the captain of the Excelsior. So he's in engineering, and he kind of crosses paths with the captain. The captain says something like, "We're going to break all the Enterprise's speed records," or something like that. And Scotty's like, "Oh yeah, great." And that's when he gets in the elevator and has the funny line where he says, "Up your shaft" to the elevator, which
that's right.
Kind of makes me laugh. The writer in the commentary, the writer was talking about how that's his favorite line in the movie because he was primarily a television writer for a long time, and he couldn't say that type of stuff on TV. So like getting to do the movie, he was like so excited that he was able to put like a line like that in there, which is funny because it's like super tame compared to nowadays, especially even TV nowadays.
Yeah, you're right.
So, so he is on the Excelsior briefly. One of my favorite moments with the Enterprise coming into space dock is we see Janice Rand. She was in the first season of the original series. She has no lines. She's like on the space dock, and she sees the Enterprise coming in, and she kind of stands up and shakes her head, and that's pretty much it. But that was just like a little cameo from the actress Grace Lee Whitney, I think, who plays Janice Rand. That was a little cameo from her, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yep.
So yeah, they go to space docks. They're told, sadly, they are told that the Enterprise is over 20 years old. They can't expect to keep using the Enterprise after 20 years, which I thought was kind of crazy. That was one of the notes I took. Like, spaceships can't be cheap to build.
Right.
You would think that they would try to use those for as long as possible, not just chuck it after 20 years and be like, whatever, had a good run.
Well, I mean, they are sending them out into the never of space. So
the final frontier.
Yeah. You got to make sure that it's tip-top shape.
That's true. But when you got Scotty, he wants to oversee the retrofit, it's going to be fine. That thing's going to be good.
We know it's going to be fine, but
yeah, that's true. And Kirk is a little upset as well. He's like, we were hoping to go back out to Genesis, and they were in the.
That's Kirk's ship.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
like it's so. Yeah, he wants.
He doesn't want to see it go to the starship graveyard,
right?
And neither do we. But anyway, the commander guy, I don't know who he is. I forget, but he says that that's not possible. Genesis is a bit of a galactic controversy, I guess. And it's off limits.
Right, and that's something I meant to write a note for, but I didn't. And they never really went into why that was.
No, they didn't. They just kind of expect you to accept the fact that it's controversial and a forbidden subject, and but you're right. They don't ever explain it. They just say, no, you can't go there. It's Starfleet says no. That's all you need to know.
And you can't talk about it.
Right.
And we're only allowing the scientist team to go there. That's it.
And that's it. Yep.
So I was kind of waiting for something on that.
Some sort of explanation, something. But yeah, they don't give you anything. One thing I meant to say before we got into Space Dock actually was there was a cadet, I think, on Enterprise who says something to Kirk. I forget exactly what he says, but it's something like, "Are they going to throw us a party when we get there?" You know,
right?
And Shatner's like, "A hero's welcome" or something. That cadet is played by Phil Morris, and Phil Morris has done a lot of voiceover work for animated series and whatnot. But I know him from Smallville. He played Martian Manhunter on Smallville.
Oh, wow.
But his very first acting credit was he was a child on the episode Miri of Star Trek, the original series.
Oh, okay.
His dad was on the original Mission Impossible show. And then I think Phil Morris played his dad's character's son on the, there was a brief reboot of Mission Impossible in the 80s. And I think Phil Morris was on that. But I thought it was interesting that his first credit was on Star Trek, and then he ends up in Star Trek 3. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, back to the storyline. We missed one very important moment, actually. Before they even get to Space Dock, Spock's quarters have been what do you call it? Zoned off, or not zoned off, but what's the word I'm looking for? Cordoned off? I don't know what I'm.
Sectioned off.
Sectioned off? Sure, that'll work.
No, that's not right.
But you know what I'm talking about.
They've been closed off.
Yeah, they've been closed off. There's caution tape and stuff on it, and Chekhov gets a notification on the computer that somebody is in Spock's quarters, and so Kirk goes and checks it out, and he hears Spock's voice, and he sees a figure in the background, and it turns out to be Bones. And Bones is talking all crazy, saying, "You got to get me home. You got to get me to Mount Saleya." And
it was pretty creepy, actually. I was putting myself in Kirk's shoes then, and I'm like, man, if I saw Bones acting like that, I would have been pretty freaked out.
Yeah, and I think Kirk kind of is, because
he
doesn't know what he's talking about. He's saying, he's like, "We are home." Or maybe they had just gotten into Space Dock, and he's like, "We are home. Mount Saleya is on Vulcan."
Right.
And then Bones kind of passes out, and so I think Kirk was super freaked out, and they kind of gloss over it a little bit once they're at the Space Dock and say, he must be suffering from exhaustion or something. And then we don't see Bones again until he's trying to charter that ship to Genesis, actually.
And at that point, they've released him.
Yeah, yeah.
He's out doing his own thing. He's getting a drink.
Yeah.
So
somewhere around there, Sarek shows up and talks to Kirk. And that's when we learn that Spock wouldn't have just sacrificed himself. He would have transferred his Katra, which is essentially his soul, I guess.
Yeah, it's his consciousness.
Yeah, in the commentary, Leonard Nimoy says, the Katra is basically, I guess the definition of Katra is anything not of the body. So it's kind of like his spirit, his consciousness, his emotions, all that stuff, everything not of the body. He would have transferred that to Kirk, because Sarek misunderstands and thinks that Kirk is the last person that saw him alive, which he was, but they were partitioned off.
Right.
And he goes, why did you leave his body on Genesis? He would have wanted you to bring his body to Vulcan, along with his Katra, to, I guess, to resurrect. One of the things that kind of confused me was that the impression I got was that was something that was not done regularly.
Well, they make a comment of it at the end of the movie that it hadn't been done for
millennia or something.
Yeah,
it was a thing of legend.
Right.
So it kind of makes me think, why would Spock?
That's a great question. Yes, because Sarek's that's the go-to.
Right. Yeah. He's of course Spock would have wanted to do this, and you're like, Would he have though? Like, I mean, maybe I'm sure he obviously knew about it, but I don't know. Like, in a way, it almost kind of undoes the sacrifice he makes at the end of Wrath of Khan. Like, knowing that he was thinking, I'll transfer my Katra to McCoy, and we'll take my body to Vulcan to this Mount Seleia, and I'll come back. Right. Makes it seem like not as much of a big deal.
It'd be like Superman being like, shoot a bullet in my chest.
Right. Yeah. Right. So in a way, I don't really care for that. I think it would have been maybe a better choice to have Sarek say, well, then, but still, why would Spock transfer his Katra? But like, it would have been a thing for Sarek to be like, we can bring him back. Like, maybe he was just so obsessed with the fact that his son passed away that he was like, we can do this. And then Kirk is kind of wrapped up in that too, or something.
He could have been like, is there any chance that maybe Spock did some kind of like, contact with someone before he died? Like, if he did, there's a chance that his consciousness was able to go in there, and maybe we could get it out. Like, kind of like I don't know if we can do it, but it's possible.
But we should explore that idea. Yeah. I think that would have worked better, in my opinion. I don't think that, because the whole idea because he even says, like, I think Kirk says, he never said anything like that to me. And Sarek was like, well, he never would have told you like, outright.
Right.
Like,
I was going to say it. Like, Sarek's like, why did you get rid of his body? And and then he's like, but he wouldn't have told you.
How You're just supposed to know, Kirk. You're supposed to be a mind reader. Yeah. That's one thing that I think I would have personally changed if I was writing it or directing it or something. But as it is, it's fine, I guess. But like I said, I think the biggest issue I have with it is it undermines his sacrifice from Wrath of Khan. So then Sarek mind melds with Kirk and realizes that he never mind melded with Kirk, or Spock never mind melded with Kirk, and his Katra is not in Kirk. So Sarek is actually kind of defeated at that point. He thinks that Spock didn't put his Katra in anybody.
Right.
And it's Kirk who goes, well, wait, hold on. Maybe, what if he touched somebody else? But before we go any further, because they were introduced before this scene, I want to talk about the Klingons. So the Klingons are our villains in this film. And one of the things I didn't really ever understand is another thing that's never really explained. But Christopher Lloyd plays Krug, I think is his name.
And this movie actually came out before Back to the Future.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So Christopher Lloyd plays Krug, and he gets like a transmission from a female Klingon who's on some sort of, I don't know what that ship was. If they were kind of like a smuggler ship.
Yeah, I think it was like a black market kind of thing. Yeah.
And I don't know, but the question is, how did they get that transmission to begin with? I don't know if they did some, if they were near the Enterprise when he recorded it, and they were able to kind of hack into the like you'd think. I don't know. That's something that's never explained.
Yeah,
it's just that they have it. They gave it to Krug, and she says, I think you'll find it useful. And he's like, you've seen it? Oh, that's too bad. Now I got to kill you.
Right. Which
she accepts.
No, she's a Klingon, so
that's absolutely
But why is that?
I don't know.
Bad,
because they just didn't. I don't know. That seems to me like, she served her purpose and doesn't fit into the story anymore. So let's kill her off. One of the notes I wrote is, it's pretty obvious to me. I'm decent at lip reading. I'm not great at lip reading, but I'm decent at lip reading. And there was a couple of times where she speaks Klingon, but her mouth is very clearly speaking English. And so she said, it's not every line, although it could be that I just couldn't lip read her English very well for some of the other lines. But I know like one of the lines she says transmission complete, and it says transmission complete in the subtitles on there. And she says something in Klingon, but if you look at her lips, she says transmission complete.
Gotcha.
So I don't know what the reasoning behind that was. I don't know if she had trouble saying some of the Klingon lines and they were like, just say it in English. And they just dubbed her over later or something. I don't know. But because Christopher Lloyd seems to be speaking Klingon, you know, I even rewound it a couple times and like muted it and just like looked at her lips to see. And I know she said transmission complete. And then the next line is, I think you'll find this information useful or something like that. And the first part of her sentence seemed like English. I felt like I could tell she was saying, I think you'll find it or something, but then I couldn't tell what she was saying after that. So I wonder if she said, or maybe they decided to kind of change the dialogue a little bit, and so they dubbed her over, and then were able to just do it in subtitles rather than like having to do reshoots or something.
Right.
They didn't talk about it on the commentary, so I don't know. But I did notice that she was speaking English in a couple of those lines. So
interesting.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear the story behind that. One of the books I have that I have not yet read, is it on this shelf behind me? It is on this shelf behind me. I have Star Trek Memories by William Shatner, which is all about the TV show. And then I have Star Trek Movie Memories, which is all about the movies, written by William Shatner. So I should have read the Star Trek 3 chapters before doing the podcast, but I didn't. But anyway, those books I think would be fun to read.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So yeah, what do you think? What did you think about Christopher Lloyd as Krug?
I liked him.
Yeah.
Thought he was pretty awesome. And I remember him being one of the main reasons why I felt like I liked it so much the first time I watched it.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting Klingon because he's big in certain moments, but he's also kind of soft-spoken in certain moments, which is not normally a thing for Klingons. But this
was, I think, only the second time that Klingons had been a part of the story.
Well, they were in the original series, but they didn't look like they looked.
They didn't. This is the first time they look like this.
Yeah.
And they kept this look for the next generation and on.
Right.
But yeah, there was one, maybe two episodes of the original series that they were in, but
yeah.
Technically the Klingons hadn't been established kind of as to what they were yet when this movie was made.
So you think Christopher Lloyd had a hand kind of in how the Klingons were portrayed from like
absolutely
here on out? Yeah, that's pretty cool. No, I think he does a great job, and I like John Larroquette is actually another one of the Klingons, which I didn't realize until I looked at the cast list.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, John Larroquette was on Night Court. He was also in the Richie Rich movie with Macaulay Culkin. He's done a ton of stuff. You'd probably know his face if you saw him, but yeah, John Larroquette plays the Klingon who is like the last Klingon standing, basically.
Right.
He's the one on the ship who's like, you promised you'd kill me.
Right.
That's John Larroquette.
I lied.
Yeah. It's kind of, since you don't know who it is, I guess I'll move on. But yeah, no, I really like Christopher Lloyd. I read in the IMDb trivia that I don't know if it was Leonard Nimoy or maybe Paramount, but somebody wanted Edward James Olmos to play Krug originally, and whoever it was convinced them that Christopher Lloyd was a better choice because he was going to be more theatrical with it. He was going to be bigger, and that's one of the things that Leonard Nimoy talked about in the commentary was that he was operatic with his kind of performance, which I thought was a really good word to describe his his performance. Operatic, which I thought
not
was
just
good,
his performance, but just his acting in general.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
because Christopher Lloyd has a style about him. Like he's got range and versatility, but it's still Christopher Lloyd,
right?
And I think that's really cool that just he's got so much facial expression and tone in his voice when he he just like you said, operatic. So
yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah, I almost wish they hadn't killed him off. I wish he could have come back in future movies.
Right.
That would have been cool. But yeah, no, I really like him in this a lot. So So yeah, Christopher Lloyd's good. And so he was introduced. This was actually the first time we ever saw a Klingon bird of prey as well. So that was kind of cool. So yeah, and the cloaking device, was that a thing before this movie, or was that introduced in this movie as well?
That is a good question. I have no idea. I cannot remember.
I can't remember either. I want to say this is the first time we've seen a cloaking device, but I'm not 100% on that.
It was cool, though, that I like how they aren't completely, invisible. Like Kirk is able to, they get close and they're like, see the distortion?
Yeah.
So they see the distortion and can see kind of there's something there, which was really neat.
I did like that a lot too. And also it seemed like in order for them to fire their weapons, they had to turn off their cloaking device or something like that. Because they see the distortion and then the bird of prey undoes their cloaking device, and I remember Sulu being like, Klingon bird of prey, and they're arming torpedoes, and that's when Kirk is like, fire. So they were ready for it, kind of waiting for them to uncloak, and so that's how they kind of got the upper hand on him. So I think in order for them to use their weapons, they have to come out of their cloaking device, or have to turn off their cloaking device, I guess.
Speaking of Sulu, I meant to write this down as a note and I didn't, but I kind of came to my mind when they are hijacking the Enterprise basically and stealing it, and Kirk makes the comment, McCoy and I have to go, but I don't expect you guys to have to come with us.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, of course we're coming with you, Captain, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But Sulu, as you know, George Takei has a very strained relationship with William Shatner.
Oh, really? I actually didn't know that.
You didn't know this?
No.
Oh, my gosh. He hates him.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
I don't know,
crazy.
but yeah, it's like no secret. Very vocal about it. And I can't watch like scenes like that and not think about how Sulu just is not sincere with his loyalty to Kirk.
Right. Well, Sulu is.
Yeah, right.
Takei's not.
I was gonna say like, yeah, it's the actor that's playing Sulu, but still, I can't help but think of what's going on behind the scenes here. Like, how did they prep this scene, and what words did they speak to each other right before shooting this? And I'm
always kind of intrigued by those types of stories. Like, this is actually a movie I've never seen, but I've always heard that Richard Gere and Deborah Winger hated each other in the movie Officer and a Gentleman, and they have to play, the romantically interested in each other,
right?
And like that, I feel like you've got to just be a good actor in order to just hate this person and then act like you're in love with them when the cameras are rolling,
right? I heard Gerard Butler and Mad Max.
Charlize Theron?
Yeah, Charlize Theron. Apparently, they had a very hard time working together on set.
What movie did they do? What am I blanking on?
No, Tom Hardy.
Oh, Mad Max?
Yes. I said Gerard Butler. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm always intrigued by that, because especially when they get along so well on screen, like George Takei and William Shatner.
Right.
That's always interesting to me that you'd think that, maybe the paycheck's just too good to say no to, but like you'd think that if you really hated one of your co-stars that much that you just wouldn't sign on to all these different movies. But
I think well, yeah, if you're talking about George Takei and William Shatner, but obviously situations like Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, like
right, that was just one movie.
Yeah. It was kind of like I'm assuming they just started.
They didn't know before they got on set.
Yeah, on set. Which is so
right, but
weird.
with George Takei, like especially if his strained relationship with William Shatner started on the original series,
right?
You'd think he'd have been like, just kill Sulu off, or not really, or he'd actually probably be like, kill Kirk off, and then I'll do these movies,
right?
But yeah, maybe maybe the maybe he likes. I could see it being two things. Like maybe the paycheck was really good, but also maybe he just likes the character of Sulu so much that he's willing to put up with Shatner in order to portray Sulu. But I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where as soon as they say cut, they go their separate ways and they don't talk to each other, and that's how they kind of were able to get through the
I'm
day.
pretty sure that's at least the way it was. But that they're still having to say stuff like in between takes.
Right.
I mean, they might not, but yeah, apparently if I'm not mistaken, his opinion was William Shatner was just extremely arrogant and just mean, basically. So
it's always a bummer to hear too,
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that, and he kind of comes across that way. Like,
yeah.
But I personally, and a lot of people knock him for his operatic
his acting. Yeah.
But I love it.
Well, he's perfect as Kirk.
Exactly.
Like, I haven't really seen him in too much else. Like, I know he's done a lot of other things. He did T.J. Hooker for a long time, and he did Boston Public, I think it was. And he's done movies and everything.
Was it Boston Legal?
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch it, but I really only watch him on Star Trek.
Yeah, same with me. And Rescue 911. He was the host.
Well, I do remember Rescue 911. That's true. I do remember that.
What's funny is I had no idea that was him until I went back and pulled it up recently.
You were like, Shatner was the host of Rescue 911?
Exactly. It was amazing.
That's funny. I do have one of his CDs. I have Has Been.
Was that Ben Folds?
Yep.
Okay.
That's a good album. But no, I don't know. But so, like, to me, his acting as Kirk is perfect.
Yeah, because it's
Captain Kirk. Yeah, that is how Kirk is.
Yeah.
And so it's perfect. But yeah, I don't, I know he gets a lot of, I don't really pay attention to his Twitter, but I know that he has said some things on Twitter that have upset people. I have no idea what those things are. I just know that there are people who don't like William Shatner now because of his Twitter. So I don't know how he is as a person. But I love him as Kirk.
Yeah.
Where were we in this film? We were talking about Krug. Basically, Kirk realizes that he needs to get back to Genesis to get Spock's body. And because we talked about the hijacking of the Enterprise and all that. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, an interesting choice with this film, was that Uhura was really not a part of this. I mean, she helped them get onto the Enterprise.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But she's really not in the movie.
And I was wondering if that was like something to do with like maybe she had other obligations or
maybe, yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, it was almost like they kind of were like, let's give you, a somewhat important role at the beginning, but you're not going to.
And then not see you until the end.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So that is one kind of bummer, because they have pretty much the entire crew.
Right.
Aside from Spock, they've got Kirk, Scotty, Sulu, Chekhov, Bones, but no Uhura, which kind of is a bummer. So it would have been nice to see her be a part of the crew for this whole mission, but for whatever reason, they decided not to do that. But yeah, they hijacked the Enterprise, and of course the Excelsior, as arrogant as they are on the Excelsior, they think that they're going to clearly catch the Enterprise.
Because they try to escape with warp drive. They're in for a surprise.
Because they have trans warp drive, whatever that means. Yeah, but Scotty has put them in their place, so they obviously don't get very far. Which was a fun little. I like how I like the sound effects, of like the engine being like do 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 do, like you hear like clunking and stuff. It's always fun.
Yeah.
We don't see the Excelsior after that,
No, you don't.
Yeah. They don't ever really talk about it or anything.
And I can't remember, but I'm assuming it's never in the movies again. Like
I don't think it is, but again, I've only seen 4 through 6 one time.
Uh-huh.
I may have seen 4 more than once, but yeah, but I don't recall ever hearing about the Excelsior again.
Yeah,
I know Sulu is a captain in one of the films. He's got his own ship, but I don't
that's
know.
right.
I don't think it's the Excelsior, but I could be wrong.
Boy, wouldn't that be ironic?
He's like, Scotty, you gotta fix my ship before I take over.
So let's talk about the Grissom.
Oh yes,
And David is on there.
David is on there, and Savick is on there. Lieutenant Savick, who was originally played by Kirstie Alley in the Wrath of Khan, and again, what I read on IMDb, you got to take that with a grain of salt, is that when she signed on to play Savick in Wrath of Khan, they didn't put into her contract, any sort of clause about coming back for sequels. So when they decided to make a part 3, they reached out to her and she asked for like a crazy amount of money or something, and they were like, no. And so they decided to get a different actress.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true. That's what IMDb says.
I mean, I can understand it. It was Star Trek 3.
Right.
After Wrath of Khan.
But the crazy thing is, I thought Wrath of Khan was Kirstie Alley's first movie. So did she just blow up after that and became like a huge star?
Well,
and was able to ask for that much money, or
when
what?
Did she
I don't
join
know.
Cheers?
That's a good question. I don't know. She joined Cheers. I know she joined Cheers in like the 4th or 5th season, I think. But whether that was, I don't know when the 4th or 5th season of Cheers was. If that was 1983 or I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know when she. It seems from that IMDb trivia that it like. She was in Wrath of Khan. Everybody loved her. She became a big star. That's what it seems like, but I don't know if that's the case.
Right.
But I like Robin Curtis as Savick in this movie. I think she actually does a really good job.
Yeah, she does.
And she plays her again in part 4. So really, it's her character more than Kirstie Alley.
Huh. I don't remember part 4, part 5, or part 6 at all, really.
Yeah.
Only thing I remember about part 4 are the whales.
The whales, yep.
And
time travel. The fact they go back to the 80s.
Oh
remember
my
that part
gosh.
You don't remember that?
I think I do now. Yeah. Now I'm starting to remember why I didn't like it. If I'm not mistaken, 5 had something to do about like God.
Yeah, I don't recall. I've only seen it one time and it was years ago, so I don't remember. But I do remember it's like the film where the Star Trek crew meets God. It's weird.
Well, I mean, it is well, unless you basically it takes God as being like it's not obviously the biblical God, Yahweh. So I don't know. I remember really liking it and just thinking it was kind of cool that. We'll have to see. Obviously.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what we think after the rewatch. But so, what did you think of Robin Curtis as Savick?
I liked it. I didn't know that was Kirstie Alley's character.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah,
I didn't know. I didn't remember her name was Savick. So I thought it was just a character that Kirk, you just assumed knew based on his reaction to her.
Right. Well, again, that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to pop in Wrath of Khan, because I don't remember the Grissom. So I don't know if there's any explanation as to how Savick and David ended up on this other ship.
I doubt it.
Yeah. Because, were they on the Enterprise when, like, Spock died and stuff?
Why do they call David Dr. Marcus?
Well, because he was Carol Marcus's son. I think it was one of those things where in Wrath of Khan,
it was a secret.
Kirk didn't know he had a kid. Yeah,
gotcha.
And then she kind of reveals that David is your son, and he's like, "What?"
So so his last name is Marcus. Okay.
Yeah. Because Carol Marcus was the scientist, I believe, in Wrath of Khan. She was played by Alice Eve in Into Darkness. That was Carol Marcus,
right.
Same character.
Right.
So the Grissom is the science starship that is sent to Genesis. It's the only starship allowed to get to Genesis. And they discover that there's a life form on Genesis when there shouldn't be.
Well, they think it's
An animal.
They think
animal
it's a life form.
Right.
Turns out to be a lot of life forms.
Several life forms.
Yes.
Well, I guess, yeah. Because they see the microbes that were on the coffin's surface have evolved and were fruitful and multiplied, as David says. And that was Savik's question, how did they evolve so quickly? And then here, one of the notes I wrote was, then David opens up the coffin. And I thought, why does he do that? Like, he doesn't even say, like, maybe we should see what effect this has had on Spock's body or something. He just, like, walks over there and just opens it up and sees that there's nobody in there. There's just the burial robes, Spock's burial robes. But that was the note I wrote. I was like, why does David even open the coffin? He knows what it is. I assume he knows what it is. And Savik knows what it is because Savik goes, these are Spock's burial robes.
Yeah.
So that was one of the weirdest things to me. There was no explanation as to why he just walked over there and opened the coffin.
Yeah.
Super bizarre. So the other note I wrote about the Grissom was that the captain of the Grissom just sucks. He's just not a very good captain, in my opinion. He kind
of gets pushed around a little bit, doesn't he?
He's a little bit, yeah, he's a bit of a pushover, I guess, but he's also just like, he doesn't like, he's very different than Kirk, obviously. He doesn't make decisions, really. He at one point he asked Savik, he's like, what would you like to do next? He's like, and then there was something else he did that I was just like, man, this captain's just not very good. He wants to play everything by the book. He does end up saving their lives inadvertently, I guess, because Savik and David, when they find the child Spock, they want to beam back aboard the Grissom. And the captain's like, well, he's like, does Dr. Marcus think there's any danger of radiation? And David's like, no. And so Savik is like, no, he doesn't think there's radiation. He's like, well, let me check with Starfleet first. I'm going to check with Starfleet before we beam you aboard.
Right.
And Savik, Vulcans are obviously supposed to be able to hide their emotion, but Savik, I thought, did a good job of being like kind of annoyed and being like, I'm sure Starfleet would think it's fine. And he's like, well, better to play it by the book. And then he ends up getting himself blown up by the Klingons. So It ends up saving the life of Spock, Savik, and David. So in a way, it was good, but at the same time, he just was not a very good captain, in my opinion. Right. I don't know how he ended up getting the command of that ship, but
it's a good question.
Yeah.
Speaking of child Spock.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, so that's, again, another thing I don't quite understand. So David says that the Genesis wave probably regenerated his cells or something like that, right?
Right.
Number one, what is the Genesis wave? Because when his coffin landed on Genesis, they had already used the Genesis.
That's a good point.
Whatever you call
and then
it.
when they show kind of the simulation of it, who was it? I guess the Klingons were.
The Klingons were watching that was part of the transmission.
And it shows, like the wave happening after it's been detonated, basically.
Yeah. So the detonation has already happened because there was plant life and everything all over the planet when they dropped the coffin. By the way, that simulation I found out was done by Pixar.
Oh, that's cool.
That was one of their. It was like at the time one of the most. I don't know, extensive might not be the right word, but it was like a big deal. This computer animated kind of display that they did, and that was done by Pixar, which I thought was cool. Anyway, so that has already happened. So I don't know if there was like another wave of radiation that took over the planet or something. And that's what caused the microbes to evolve, and that's what created. But I still don't really understand why it didn't just bring Spock back to life rather than reverting him back to a child and having him grow.
Right. Even if it what did he say? He didn't say regenerate his cells. I
thought that's what he said, but maybe he didn't. Yeah, I thought he said I could be wrong, but I thought he said the Genesis wave may have regenerated his cells or something like that.
He might have. It seemed to me like whatever he said made me think of kind of like like reboot them.
Yeah.
So I could see why the cells would basically be starting out young again.
Okay.
But to have him actually, go back to an actual size of a child doesn't make sense.
Right. No, it's weird. Yeah, it's bizarre. And then he is rapidly aging because the planet is rapidly aging, and he's like linked to the planet.
Right.
Another thing
and
that I don't.
Apparently, if they take him off the planet,
he'll be fine.
He's good.
Yeah, because he will no longer be linked to the planet.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, like, I like this movie, but there's a couple of things that make me kind of go, "You didn't really think this through,"
right?
But
that was one of the things I really loved about the original series.
Yeah.
Especially, it was really apparent in season 1 and like the first half of season 1. There were several episodes, the very first episodes I remember watching, and there being something like that, to where my mind was immediately, I don't think you thought this through. And, we've got a big, and it was something,
like
it wasn't
plot
even
hole or something.
Yeah, it was like a plot hole, but it wasn't even like a big, huge deal. Like, it was kind of like a side thing, kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, if you don't explain why Spock stops aging when he goes off the planet, yeah, you're probably going to notice, or there's a good chance you'll notice, but it's not going to break.
Right.
And there was stuff like that in the show. And then, like, 3/4 of the way through, it'll come up. And they'll explain it. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can't believe they addressed that. Like, I was really not expecting them to.
Yeah.
So, early original series episodes were really smart in how they were written.
I agree with that. And actually, you talking about it makes me almost want to go back and restart the original series. But I think I really need to just power through the third season first. Just finish it.
Just do it. Just finish it. Yeah, because then you'll get stuck there again.
Right. But like some of those first season episodes are so good.
They're amazing. And
even the second season obviously has a lot of good stuff. And the third season that I'm in right now, yeah, just not as good. But the first season has some really solid episodes. Yeah, and if they had done something like that in this movie, that would have maybe been okay. If they had gone back later and Kirk or somebody had been like, well, why does he stop aging when we get him away from the planet? And they had kind of given a good explanation for it. That would have been cool, but they never do that. They just assume that we'll believe that logic or whatever. That
believe it, not think about it, or forget about it.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I will say that kid, the youngest Spock, he looked super familiar to me. So I looked him up, and he was the kid. I don't know how familiar you are with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh yeah, I watched that a lot.
He's the kid that's like mowing, that comes and mows the lawn, and Rick Moranis is going, no, and the kid's like all weirded out because Rick Moranis doesn't want him to mow his lawn.
Right. And then he gets down in the grass with the magnifying glass.
Yeah. And the kid's like, okay, weirdo. Yeah, that's that kid.
Okay.
Strange turn of events for the actor, because I went to his page and I saw that he had passed away at like the age of 29 or something. He apparently went to prison for like armed robbery or something, and then died of a heroin overdose while in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. So kind of sad. But also super crazy that the kid that played young Spock ended up committing armed robbery and then dying of a heroin overdose in prison. Super weird.
Yeah. But it goes to show, like, it doesn't matter what opportunities you have, you can always have a dark road that you can go down.
Yeah, you never know. I didn't really look up the other actors the other actors who play Spock through the years, I guess, because I didn't.
Yeah, there's like 5 actors, which is just really weird.
And none of them, in my opinion, really look alike. They don't all look so different that it's. They were trying to find actors, I think, that looked similar to Leonard Nimoy. Obviously, the youngest one, I think just kind of chose whoever. But there's one kid who I thought, like, he actually had a facial structure that reminded me of Eddie Redmayne. who is an actor now, who probably was, I don't know, he might not have even been born when this movie came out. But he's kind of like the 17-year-old. He's the one that is struggling because he's going through Ponfar.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I thought Ponfar was like the Vulcan mating thing that happens every 7 years. So my question is, did he mate with Saavik? Watch the first time I watched it, I was like, did he mate with Saavik? And so then the second time I watched it, I kind of paid attention, and they do the whole like, he strokes her hand and she strokes his hand, but then it cuts and you see them. He's like asleep, and they're still kind of holding hands, but she's asleep, kind of off to the side.
So it's kind of like we fade away and then we come back.
And so I don't. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not sure that they mated necessarily, but like she helped him get through Ponfar. But I looked it up. Because I was like, okay, I thought Ponfar was like a Vulcan mating thing. So I looked it up. And according to, Trek Wiki or whatever it is, Ponfar was like a mating thing where they either had to mate or they had to go through like a battle ritual, which was the premise of the show Amok Time, which is like season 2, episode 1 or something from the original series. And he obviously didn't battle Saavik, so I don't know. I'm
gonna lean with you are probably onto something there.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah. But shortly after that,
they could have really done some crazy stuff with that.
They could have, yeah. They could have had like Saavik with Spock's kid or something,
right?
Yeah. It could have been interesting, and would it have even been like Spock's kid because he didn't even have his Katra at the time? It's that version of Spock is essentially just Spock's body living. It's not even, he doesn't have his consciousness, he doesn't have his emotions, he doesn't have his spirit.
Yeah.
That's just Spock's shell.
Well, genetically it would have been Spock's.
Right, that's true. But like they could have opened a can of worms with that, is what I'm saying though. You know what I mean? They could have made some interesting things kind of go on with that.
Yeah. And
I think they just ignored it.
They wanted to do whales instead.
Right, they wanted to save the whales in part 4. That was way more important. I liked part 4. I just want to say that. Anyway, but after that scene, Krug finds his way to Genesis, and Krug's whole thing is the transmission he saw was Kirk talking about Genesis, and they decide that this would be the ultimate weapon. I don't know exactly how it would be a weapon, unless they plan on using it. Oh, it's
definitely a weapon.
They plan on using it on like planets that are already inhabited.
Yes, and it just basically rewrites
wipes everybody out.
Yep. Not to mention, they didn't know this, but because it's a failing, experiment, the planets that they use it on will be destroyed within
a
very short period of time.
That's true. So it is, it's even more of a weapon for the Klingons than they even think it is. But at the same time, Saavik tries to tell Krug that it's not even worth using because it is a failure. Because the planet is going to be destroyed.
Well, does she know what he wants to use it for?
Well, I mean, he's a Klingon.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either. But I know she does say, like, she says something about, like, Genesis being a failure or something like that. I don't recall. But I don't think Krug believes her, I think is what it really boils down to. He's like, he just wants the weapon. And now that I recall, I know he's already blown up Grissom. And he wanted prisoners. He ends up shooting. That's one of the scenes I liked a lot with Christopher Lloyd, was after the Grissom is blown up, he yells at one of the Klingon officers. He's like, I wanted prisoners. And the Klingon goes, a lucky shot. And he just kills that Klingon officer. It's like,
which looks awful.
Yeah. Well, it's special effects from 1984, I guess. But
yeah, it's cool because he does say beforehand, he's like, aim at the engines only.
You're right. He does.
And it blows up the whole ship. And I love how later on they do it again. And he says to the gunner, he's like, engines only. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I got it.
It would have been hilarious if they'd been like, dear God, please let me hit the engines only. one of the things I forgot to mention was when Krug and his like two other Klingons get onto the Genesis planet, they find Spock's coffin, and those microbes have evolved even more. They're now like a big snake type thing, and that's one of the things I love about it. Was I think one of the Klingons is about to shoot it, and Krug is like, "No." And he grabs it, and he doesn't say anything, but he's basically like, "No, don't shoot it. I need to strangle this thing with my bare hands."
It gets him for a minute, like it's choking him, and you're like, "Oh."
And he just squeezes harder, kills it, and then he just throws it off himself.
Yeah.
And there's like no discussion of that. He just throws it off himself, and then he pulls out his tricorder. Well, I guess it's not tricorder; it's a communicator. And he's like, "There's nothing down here." He's like, "We haven't seen anything." I just always thought that was weird. Like, no, don't shoot it. I need to kill it with my bare hands. I guess that's the Klingon way, perhaps. Remind me, because I don't know if I quite recall. Like, I know Kirk tries to hail the Grissom, and there's no response because obviously we know that the Grissom has been blown up. But I don't recall. I'm trying to. I mean, I watched this yesterday. You'd think I'd remember, but I can't recall how Kirk ends up down, like how they get to Genesis. I mean, I know how they get to Genesis. They're on the Enterprise, but how do they get down to the ground? Like, when do they beam down, right? But are they looking for somebody? Or?
No, they're getting off the ship because it's about to be taken over.
Oh, yeah. That's right. So that's right. They get to the Genesis and they encounter the bird of prey.
Right.
That's right. Because I remember now that once Krug finds Savik and David, he's like wanting to take them prisoner, but then he finds out that the Enterprise is coming and he beams back up onto his bird of prey. And they're cloaked, and Kirk sees the distortion in the stars, I guess. Like you were talking about. That's right. And then they end up having to self-destruct.
I like that, by the way. Keurig is like he gets hailed by, what's his name? The actor that you were talking about. I'm assuming it was him. Anyway, I'm trying to give him some credit. The one Klingon.
Oh, John Larroquette?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's the one that hails him, and he's like, "There's a Federation ship," or he just. He calls him, and he's like, "I thought I told you not to bother me." He's like,
"No interruptions." Yeah.
He's like, "But there's a Federation ship coming." And he goes, "Bring me up."
I read on IMDb, again, I don't know how true this is, but I read on IMDb that Christopher Lloyd had a hard time remembering that he needed to speak into the communicator when he was talking to the ship.
Uh-huh.
And apparently there was a few times where he like yelled to the sky, "Bring me up." And they had to be like, "No, Chris, you got to remember, you got to talk into the communicator. They can't just hear you."
That's hilarious.
I hope that's true, because I think it would be really funny.
Yeah.
I remember now. So Kirk they have their whole back and forth with the Klingons, and eventually they decide that they basically have to sacrifice the Enterprise. This is the movie that destroys the Enterprise.
Yes.
They do the self-destruct.
And they mention that, like, in the beginning of the movie, how they don't want, if I'm not mistaken, they're basically like, I would never, watch the Enterprise fall apart or be destroyed or whatever. And then they had to make the decision and literally watch it as it fell from the sky burning.
Which I really like that scene.
Such a cool scene, yeah.
Yeah, really I love that scene of them, all of them just kind of standing there watching the Enterprise go by and go down in flames, basically. And it's like probably one of the best scenes in the movie, just because it's emotional,
Yeah.
It's their ship. It's the one that they've had, even though it's technically, I guess, is it the same ship as the one from the original series? Because I know in the motion picture, he's an admiral at this point. And
I think it is, because don't they later, like, this is the NCC 1701.
And they make a 1701A or
I
something.
believe so, yeah. And this one did not have any indication that. So yeah, I think it's later on. I guess in 4 maybe they get the.
Well, that's true, and the commander does say it's 20 years old, which, if you're doing the math from the original series to this movie, it would be about 20 years, right? Although, technically, if you think about the fact that Captain Pike was the original Enterprise captain before Kirk took over, it would be older than that. But I think you're right. I think it is the ship from the original series. It was maybe had some enhancements or whatever during the motion picture. That's one of my favorite scenes from the motion picture is when Kirk is seeing the Enterprise in space dock, and
they're just kind of going around it. It's a
long
scene,
long,
but it's really cool.
Super cool, yeah. So I think you're right. I think it is the Enterprise from the TV show. So I mean, it is. I mean, that's the ship they've been on for years, and
I think later on, like, isn't the one in Next Generation? Isn't that like D or something?
I think it. Yeah. You might be right.
Like,
I don't
so
remember exactly.
There's been lots of incidents with the Enterprise
Yeah.
in between this
That's
one
a good point.
and.
We've been talking a while about this movie, so I don't, I think we can probably kind of wrap up towards the end, but essentially, they all end up kind of on the planet's surface, and the crew end up beamed back up to the Klingon bird of prey, kind of to be prisoners. Kirk is like, "You need to beam up Spock," and that's actually one of the lines I love because it's a great kind of villain moment. He's like, send Spock up too, and he goes, "No," and Kirk goes, "Why?" And he goes, "Because you wish it."
Right.
I was like, that's pretty cool.
A lot of just angry sentiment here, for kind of no reason, honestly.
Yeah, because they don't even really. I mean, Krug, I guess, kind of knows who Kirk is because of the transmission, but they just hate each other. I think these Klingons especially just hate the Federation, probably in general and whatnot, and so they just want to use this weapon on whoever. But they get into a fight. Kirk and Krug do. And one of the last notes I wrote was that the fight scene reminds me of the TV show. It reminds me of a lot of the Kirk fight scenes that he got into in the TV show.
Yep.
Which is cool, but at the same time, you'd think there would be something a little bigger for a movie, But at the same time, I do like that it's kind of almost a throwback to the TV show.
Right. Yeah, definitely. We didn't even talk about David and his fate.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
That's pretty important.
That is pretty important, yeah. Krug tells the Klingons that are on the surface to kill... This is before the Enterprise blows up. He tells the Klingons to kill one of the hostages, and he goes, "I don't care which. Any of them." And actually, the Klingon is about to kill Savick when David kind of tries to intervene, and because he fights the Klingon ends up stabbing him in the chest. And yeah, so then Kirk's son is killed.
Yeah.
And that's actually... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I really like Shatner's...
reaction.
Yeah, his performance there is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. So good. Him, kind of falling back towards the chair and missing the chair and falling on the ground. Yeah, I think it works really well. He does a good job with that.
Yeah, he does.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I would have forgotten about that, and that would have been a shame because that was a big moment in the movie. I even like when he gets down to the planet's surface, everybody's kind of looking at Spock's body, because I think at this point we haven't seen his face yet, but I think at this point he has aged into Leonard Nimoy Spock.
Yes.
We do get that weird moment where it's kind of halfway between the 20-year-old
where it's like
Spock
doing the
it's like a weird makeup, and it's like parts of his head are bubbling.
Yeah, it's like
and
deformed
stuff.
And
it's bizarre.
It's kind of gross.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know
why
why
they did
his
cheekbone pop out.
Yeah. So we kind of get a hint that it's the Leonard Nimoy. I almost said McCoy. Spock. And when Kirk gets to the surface, he kind of looks at Spock, but then he walks over to David. And I like that nobody really kind of went with him. He kind of goes over to David and kneels down, and he kind of has a moment. Not even the camera doesn't kind of go with him. You know what I mean? It's he has his moment with David on his own, and then he kind of comes back over to Spock, and I like to think that he's probably like, I got to focus on the mission at hand. I'll grieve later type of thing, you know?
Right.
So they deal with Spock and everything, and then they have the fight scene with Krug and all that. But yeah, that I loved the scene with Shatner and him falling and saying, "You killed my son," and all that stuff. He does seem to kind of move on quickly, but like I said, in my brain, I kind of take it as he's telling himself he's got to focus on the mission.
Yeah, you got to go with that, definitely. That
he'll
it's
grieve
Kirk
later.
just being the captain that he has to be.
Right, exactly. So once he defeats Krug, they basically take Spock to Vulcan, and they perform the ceremony on him. And there's kind of like a high priestess of Vulcan who does it, played by Dame Judith Anderson, who I don't really know. This was actually, according to IMDb, she had not really acted for like 20 years or something before doing this movie. She was obviously a very big actress, but had retired essentially. Okay, maybe not 20 years. It looks like she did a movie in 1975, did a TV movie in 1983, and then did Search for Spock in 1984.
So it would have been 9 years.
Yeah, it had been a little while. She had basically gone into retirement a bit, and then was kind of did Search for Spock. So, but I don't know who that actress is really. I don't recognize her. I'm not sure. She might have been in movies I've seen or something, but I don't know. But Dame Judith Anderson, she plays the high priestess of Vulcan.
Did you notice her makeup?
I guess I didn't.
You didn't. Her lipstick looks like a preschooler just took it and just did one big loop.
I wonder if she did it herself. Like the makeup people were like, "Let me help you." And she's like, "I got it." And they were like, "Yep, that's good."
They're on Vulcan, sure.
Yeah, we'll just say it's a Vulcan thing. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's hilarious. I didn't notice that. I'll have to look at that. So yeah, they perform the ceremony. They say that it's a big risk. They even say that, they tell McCoy, because they ask who's like the keeper of his katra, and McCoy's like, "That's me." And she's like, the danger posed to Spock the danger posed to you is, almost as great as the danger posed to Spock, or something like that. And he's like, "I accept the danger." But it doesn't really seem all that dangerous of an operation, She puts his hand on McCoy, she puts her hand on Spock, and it's pretty much done.
Right.
I almost wish there had been like a little bit more of some danger.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to kind of just go with it in your mind, and you realize she's literally transferring people's consciousness, and things could get messed up.
And she's not only transferring Spock's conscience, but she has to transfer Spock's conscience from McCoy without transferring McCoy's conscience.
Yeah,
she has to separate them. So I mean, it's probably difficult, and especially since she's literally never done
this.
I assume she's never done it. I don't know how long Vulcans live.
But she said it's legend.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah,
so she's like, I don't even know if this is real. Basically,
I guess I'll try it. I don't know. That's true, though. Yeah, you're right. She does say it's legend. So, yeah, I would take that as meaning she's never done it herself.
Yeah.
But she does it successfully. And I like that Spock doesn't just immediately know who everybody is. He kind of has to, like, remember it, which is super cool. And I like that, he... Does he say, like, is the ship safe? Does he say one of the same lines he does from Wrath of Khan?
I can't remember, but Kirk does say, "You saved the ship."
Yeah.
You saved all of us.
And then he says, "Jim."
Yeah.
Your name is Jim. And then one of the things in this movie that I don't like happens, where all the crew walks up to Spock, and they put their hands on him, and they're like,
yeah,
they're just like grinning wildly.
Well, actually, it was funny that you mentioned reading lips, because I've never really tried to do that. So I'm guessing I'm not that great, but I noticed that they are actually, each one of them, it's like 4 of them, but all of them take turns saying "welcome back."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but it's inaudible and on the closed caption.
It's just kind of goofy to me. It's just like it's like a group
Right.
hug type
Right.
weird, it's like, it's a little cheesy to me.
Yeah,
And,
I hear you.
but that being said, I do love Leonard Nimoy or Spock's reaction where he turns to Kirk and he just does his signature eyebrow raise, and I like that that's how the movie ends. So it's cool. I like that it ends. Leonard Nimoy doesn't really have a whole lot of screen time. We see him briefly kind of on the planet, side of his face type of thing. And then this scene, essentially. And in fact, he's not even listed, aside from director, he's not listed in the cast in the opening credits. And then in the ending credits, it says...
Are you sure? I thought he was.
No, I'm positive, yeah. Because it says it's William Shatner. Then there's kind of a long pause in between credits where Leonard Nimoy's name would be. And then it says DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, blah, 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 blah. It never says Leonard Nimoy except for directed by Leonard Nimoy. And then in the end credits, it says, and as Spock, and it lists all the 800 actors that played Spock. Not that many, obviously. It's like 5. And then Leonard Nimoy's name is at the end of that list. But that's the only time he's listed. I don't know about the main cast in the credits, but he's listed there when the end credits first start rolling.
I'll take your word for it, but I could have sworn that it says as Spock, Leonard Nimoy at the beginning because I remembered seeing that without all the additional names. But you said you're positive, so we'll just.
And I mean, I watched it on DVD. I know you watched the digital version, so unless the digital version is different for some reason, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, there's no mention of his name in the beginning. Because also I listened to it with commentary, and he mentioned in the commentary that his name he did not want his name listed. He even he said in the commentary when the trailers first came out, or like when they first started making the trailers, they had Leonard Nimoy's name listed in the cast. It was like William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. And he was like, you can't do that. You got to take my name out of it because it'll kind of ruin the ending, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I'm like 99.9% sure his name is not in the opening credits, other than director.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, John, let's rate the movie, shall we?
Sure.
All right. For me personally, I like the movie, but I think there are other Star Trek movies that are better. I'm leaning towards 3 stars, although there's a part of me that kind of wants to give it 3.5.
Wow.
So I'm curious to hear what you think. But right now I'm going to say 3. Maybe you can convince me to give it that other half star.
I was actually thinking about giving it 4.
Oh, wow.
But after talking about it, I think I'm going to go with 3.5.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What brought it down half a star? Was it some of the stuff that was not explained?
No. Well, like I said, like when I initially watched it, it was one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'm going to keep it at 4.
All right, 4 stars.
Because I really liked this movie. I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I liked the story. It's the introduction of the Klingons. Christopher Lloyd did a great job kind of paving the path for what they would be. And you have, the emotional scene with Kirk losing his son. There was a lot of good stuff in this movie. The death.
You've convinced me.
The death of the Enterprise.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 stars.
All right, I'm gonna give it 3.5. That's you've convinced me to bring it up a half star because you're right. The death of the Enterprise, the death of David, Christopher Lloyd, all those things I think kind of outweigh some of the problems this film has. So 3.5 stars for me. So yeah, pretty good. It's I don't remember what I gave Wrath of Khan. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to our episode and see what I gave Wrath of Khan. Was it 5 stars? I don't remember. I don't think it was quite. Well, back then I was giving it letter grades because we were doing different things. So I'd be curious to hear what I gave it.
I'm pretty sure you gave it way up there.
I would probably, like, if you were to ask me right now what I would give Wrath of Khan, it would probably be 4.5. So, I don't know what that equals letter grade wise, but yeah, we'd love to know what you think about Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. You can always leave us a comment on our website, cinemaheroes.com. You can leave us a comment on our Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM Podcast. You can tweet at us at Cinema Heroes on Twitter. Same with Instagram, same handle. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can always leave us a comment in the comments below the video. Also, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. We'd love that. We'd love to hear from you any way you want to reach out to us. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.